Who in this room has someone that they are holding space for, someone that they're praying for? Who in this room could use some prayer? What do you do when you pray? What does it look like for you? Is it a big question mark? Just breathe into that question for a second. Close your eyes if you need to, whatever it takes. But if someone says, will you pray for me? Or whatever language that is, will you send me light? Will you hold space? Will you do a novena? Whatever it is. What happens for you? What do you do? How do you be with that? Do you do something once? Do you do it over and over again? Do you write down the name? Do you send it in to someone else? Do you put it on a shelf or an altar? Do you put it in a sacred space? Do you take some time in the quiet? Do you have words that you rehearse or you repeat? Prayer is probably as different as each person in this room, for each of us. And studies have been coming out for years now showing the effectiveness of prayer. Larry Dawsey is someone who I studied when I was back in college, and he's an MD, and he did research and does research on the effectiveness of prayer and how when people are held in sacred light, it supports them, how it heals. And, when he goes into this work, people always want to know, well, what kind of prayer works better? Does it help more if a whole bunch of people are praying for me? Does it help if someone prays in this way? And Unity has some things to say about this. But what I want to start with saying is that there is no wrong way to pray. I think that the deepest truth that comes from the practice of prayer is that if someone has benevolence in their heart, if they have absolute love in their heart, they have positive intention, they have a deep connection and desire to help, that can be felt, right? Just like if someone has a desire to harm, that can be felt, right? You know that they say in one of the last things I was listening to, a podcast with Larry Dawsey, he said that it's been shown about 5% of people actually pray for harm for someone else. They actually pray for someone else to be harmed or to suffer or whatever it is. And, there was more of a conversation of who does that really harm? Does it harm the person or does it harm the person who's actually holding the prayer? But what if we could take a look into the way we pray and really use what we think and what we believe and what we know to activate an expanded prayer practice? To get out of the prayer of our childhood or our education or even society around us and tune in to how our God thoughts or our God beliefs could shift our prayer practice. In a lot of traditional prayer, there's a lot of asking. And I would even say that it's possible that most prayer is actually hoping. Right? Most prayer is actually just this launching of a moment of hope, like, please. Could this be more okay? Could this be healed? Is it possible? Asking these questions. And traditionally, there is an idea that God is a person, most frequently a man, who lives somewhere or everywhere or in the sky. And we send off messages of hope to this outer God. Now, presumably, if God is taught to you as a child or as an adult to be a father, and you have traditional ideas of father figures, it would make sense if God is a person that is the one you ask for something. It would make sense that your prayer would be a prayer of please, a prayer of begging, a prayer of hope, a prayer of asking. Because if there is a concept that there is a God that will give some things out and decide who gets what, then you would in turn want your prayer to be as persuasive as possible. No? You would really want to get into it. You would really want to be like, I am your most dedicated one, and here is my request. And this is the pain that it's causing. This is the pain that I'm in or the other person's in. And let me plead their case. Let me just show you how amazing they are and how wonderful it would be if they were healed, and all the things that they would do if they were healed, or all the things that I would do, or how I would be next if you would only grant me this request. It's a little bit like an episode of The People's Court. Like, let me plead my case, and if I plead it in a way that is honorable, that is good enough, that is right, my hope will be granted. A Unity minister that I ran into in my ministerial school training said that hope is a vision not committed to. A hope is a vision not committed to. So is there anything we can do as spiritual practitioners on the path with a very different God concept? Is there anything that we can do to commit to the prayer? To become the field or the space for which the prayer can be most easily activated and demonstrated? I do believe that we are in an era of mind science, mind-body science. Of course, it's becoming well known that how we are, how we be, affects how we feel. And we also are seeing more and more in quantum physics and other science about how we are interconnected. So it suffice to say that there's a possibility that our prayer could become, if we dive into it and we look at it, it could possibly become more fruitful. But that's an interesting thing to say, isn't it? To say it's possible that the prayer could shift. Now, none of us would willingly or wantingly, pray for someone's harm, right? But think about prayer as a big soup, a big stew for a moment. And from what we know about mental science, about mind-body connection, we are sitting in a stew all of the time. And when we go into prayer, we put things in the stew. We cut vegetables, we put spices and seasonings, we stir it all up. And then we sit in it and we soak. This is essentially the activity of prayer, and I want you to keep this image in mind so that you can go back to that first question of what do you do when you pray? What do you put in that stew? No doubt, some of us put in worry. No doubt, some of us put in anger. No doubt, some of us put in disappointment. No doubt, some of us sit right in it, in a space of hopelessness. When we look at the effectiveness of prayer and the activity of prayer, and we know that prayer goes beyond religion, it's not that one religion has the corner on prayer and theirs prayers work and other prayers don't and this and that, but we know as well in every religion we have the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. We have the people that take their practice and they just apply it, right? It can be dry, it can be, this is how it is when I go to synagogue or when I go to church or when I kneel, when I pray, when I do my practice, this is how I am. But see me outside of that practice and you'll see an entirely different me. right? There's people that follow the rules, and then there's people that embody the Spirit that may be breaking some of the rules of a religion. But they are full of the Spirit. Their intention is so full. I believe that in every tradition, some of the most powerful prayers are those met by people who get into a deep, deep experience of the allness, of the oneness. An experience in their prayer time that takes them beyond the worries and concerns, but their devotional life or their spiritual life or what they've learned or what they've begun to practice has become such an experience of connection, of unity consciousness, that when they pray, they're not coming from a place of lack or separation. They're actually soaking in a stew of the divine. They're actually immersed and saturated in there in the complete space where there is no separation, where there is simply oneness. And I believe that this oneness, this experience, is the highest form of prayer. But much of praying still remains actually sitting with the distance between what is and what is hoped for. Much of praying is sitting with the distance between what is and what is hoped for. So can we look at our God concept and bring them together? Can we give ourselves permission to explore prayer? To explore it not so much as a religious idea, but as one of our real gifts, our faculties, almost like our little Harry Potter skills, but that we're all sitting upon a skill set. We are all sitting upon the potential of activating good. And some of us, at some times, probably all of us, unknowingly, are holding exactly the opposite of what we want to be sending out, of what we want to be stewing in. You may have been taught that it's not okay to question what God is or what prayer is or how to do it. But once our God concept changes, well, once we no longer have an idea that God is outside of us or the authoritarian or someone that's withholding good, ready to dispense it if you are behaving well enough, it makes sense that we would look into our prayer life because our God concept can shift. And in unity, people have all sorts of God concepts, but you can think about God as being the grand overall design, G-O-D, the grand overall design, the great allness of the universe. And in prayer, if that's true, if God is everywhere present, power itself, love itself, emanating and expressing through the uniqueness of you and all life, then it would make sense to say God is not withholding anything. And then we can contemplate the possibility that God is a great yes. And that prayer is no longer hoping for the yes. The yes is already given. Then prayer becomes not about hoping or asking so much, but it becomes about being into alignment, getting into alignment with the highest possibilities. Getting into alignment with the highest wisdom, getting into alignment with the highest of health, abundance, prosperity, you name it, whatever it is, getting into alignment. Now, here's the little bit of a dangerous part. We can't go from creating an idea of God as being something or someone that would hurt us to the idea that we're the ones that are bad. Like, oh, I'm so bad, it's me now that's wrong. If things aren't going the way I think they should go, if things aren't going the way I'm attached to them going, if things seem to my separate sense of self or my own mind that they are wrong or bad, I must be wrong or bad. If we go there, friends, I think we're missing the mark. But there are tools that will help us get into alignment. How do we pray for someone when we hold them in prayer? What feels better to you? And remember, unity isn't about someone telling someone else what to do or how to do it. Unity is about testing everything against our own hearts and say, is this true for me? Is there something in this for me? Am I finding myself? Am I expanding? Does this feel expansive to me? How does it feel if someone asks you to pray for them, or if you ask someone to pray for you? And the practice that they go into is sitting and stewing in a place where they are seeing you at peace, where they are seeing you as luminescent, where they are seeing you as light, where they are seeing you happy, laughing, whole, where they are holding maybe not some specific outcome, but they're saying, let thy will be done, or they're saying this or something better. They're holding the space, saying, let my kindness, my care, my compassion, my love be of service in the highest way to this radiant being of light. And then sitting with the yes, sitting with the absolute knowing that the universe would not have anything else to give but a yes. And then sitting in a trusting that that gift of prayer, that gift of holding each other or holding self in space has power. We are made of thoughts, emotions, actions. In Unity, we teach that prayer is not so much talking to God as if there is a God who we need to change, that needs to change its mind because somehow it's either, got it wrong or it's mean or something happened. But that in fact, we are integrate beings, as the old school Unity song said, our thoughts are prayers, and we are always praying. Our thoughts are prayers, listen to what you're saying, seek a higher consciousness, a state of peacefulness. Every thought becomes a prayer, knowing God is always there. Can we let our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions come into harmony, come into congruence, come into alignment with a state of absolute trust, with a state of bliss, with a state of gratitude, with a state of kindness, with a state of benevolence, with a state of healing, with a state of wholeness? And can we just feel that and allow ourselves moments of feeling that? And recognizing that the design of the universe is so magnificent. It's so intricate. It's so orderly that we can trust that process, that in fact we don't have to go into the human condition and start going into the story and start going into the problems and the details and say, I need this to happen by this time because this is what's going on right now, and if you're going to fix this, it needs to be like this. And getting so into our mind's idea that we're actually praying the problem, that we're actually praying the suffering, that we're actually holding the separation. It takes an incredible surrender, doesn't it, friends? Because we have to let go of our attachments, and we have to let go of the idea that we're here to tell God what to do. But instead of praying with our eyes on the problem, Instead of praying with our eyes on the distance between what is and what we hope for, instead of praying with our eyes on what seems to be the error or the difficulty, we pray with our eyes on the source. We pray with our eyes on the source. And we trust that when we soak in the source, it's the highest gift that we can offer someone else. It's the highest gift that we can offer ourselves. These are powerful tools. New Thought leader Ernest Holmes said, "Life is a mirror and will reflect back to the thinker what he thinks into it." Our thinking is a tool. The highest way we can use that tool is to believe in the allness, to soak in the allness. Eric Butterworth, Unity teacher, says this: prayer as consciousness of the allness of life. The key to understanding prayer is allness. I use this term often, but it's so important. I use it interchangeably with the word God. So often when we use the word God, we think out, we think up, we think something separate. As long as we think something separate, we've created a separation that exists only within us and otherwise does not exist. Prayer, he says, can only be effective when we think oneness. So instead of thinking God, I think allness. Allness means totality. It's not out there somewhere. It's the whole thing. In other words, you might use the word universe, the whole of things. All life is present. If there's allness, the whole is present. All life is present, all wisdom is present, all substance is present, all guidance is present, all love is present. We live and move and have our being in this allness, which is present, not absent. He goes on to say, prayer is not trying to get more life, to try to get more love from God, but instead to know our oneness. The psalmist sang, "Be still and know that I am God." Trying to get more is to be still and know that I am. That I am the very activity of life, all life, expressing at the point where I am. I need to know that. The fact is, we don't know it. Because we don't know it, we lose consciousness of it. He says we're out of the awareness of the allness of life. And when we're out, we experience separation and deterioration. The need is not for God to give us more life, but for us to be more aware of the allness of life, which is present in how I live, move, and have my being. Gandhi said, prayer is not an old woman's idle amusement. Properly understood and applied, it is the most potent instrument of action. So when in doubt, when in confusion, when wanting to bless, pray in the consciousness of the allness. Namaste.